Where are the low value men? Like, what are all the low value men up to during these trying times? Because the high value men, I know they're around. They won't shut the fuck up. Low value men, I have not heard a word out of. I'm starting to think I'm on their side. I think I want one of those. I want a low value man. They don't make podcasts. I haven't seen one low value man make a podcast. Do they not know how to use microphones? Maybe that's a good thing. That's hot. All right, I've never seen a man use a microphone for good.
Until now, everybody buckle up. It's low value mail time with your host, Danny Polishchuk. Oh, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back to an all new episode of Low Value Mail on this August. It's August already. Where has the time gone? August 1st, 2023, the year of one of our lords, I think. It's episode 72, and tonight, on the show, we have with us Mikhail Svetov. Everybody, Mikhail is a major figure in the Russian Libertarian movement. He's a podcaster. He has a YouTube channel that you can go check out, SVTV. And he's going to be on tonight. I think I mentioned it last week, but I have this kid who makes clips for me for Low Value Mail in the bathhouse. And he's actually from Russia, which is a real pain in the ass because it's just he's not like a Putin supporter or anything, but he just it's very difficult for me to pay him for his clips because of all the stuff with the war and all that stuff. But he was like, hey, you should have this guy on. And look at that. Look at that. So, and we're going to bring him on very shortly. Before I bring him on, please do me a favor. Like, subscribe, follow this channel, subscribe to this channel, because you might be watching this on the wrong channel. I've had so many people telling me, they're like, hey, did you stop doing the shows? Did you stop doing all of your shows? And I'm like, no, I'm just on a new channel because I got a strike because I'm a bad boy. No, but I got a strike and then I moved it over, which I think in the grand scheme of things, it will be better that I moved it over. But legitimately, some people don't know. So, and someone's already calling, and which is silly because the phone lines are not open, but they will be. They will be. So just chill, everybody. If you'd like to support what I do here on Low Value Mail and the Bathhouse, you can do so one of two ways, either patreon.com/lowvaluemail or Twitter or x.com. Go to x.com/DannyJoke. Pretty cool. Is it? I don't know. Who fucking knows? But anyways, if you want to support the show, once I hit 5, so currently Low Value Mail is 2 hours long. Once I hit 500 subs, paid subs, it'll be 2.5 hours long until we hit 1,500 subscribers, and then the show will be 4 hours long. I'll have a producer. I'll have multiple guests. It'll be a great time. That'll be, hopefully soon, but the way things are trending, probably is going to be a while, but that's fine. I enjoy doing the show very much. I enjoy you all. So if you'd like to support the show, $5 a month. And on Patreon, you can even get a 7-day free trial. So you can literally try it out for 7 days. I did a live stream yesterday, a subscriber-only live stream. So you missed out on that because you don't want to fork up the 5 bones. But if you can't or whatever, it's all good. Tell a friend. Honestly, if you don't have $5 a month, just tell a friend. Be like, hey, there's this cool show. I like it. And that's honestly just as good. And we're about 200 subscribers away from my goal. So go do that. You get all sorts of other bonus stuff, but whatever. Not important. Next week, we have Danielle Bolelli from the History on Fire podcast, which is a fire podcast because I'm 12. We got him next week joining us. And then after that, we have Joey B. Tunes, Jeremy Kaufman. And then after that, War Mode joins the show. Wow, there's a major echo in here. We got a new studio. I didn't realize the echo. We got War Mode joining the show. And then Mark Alpert the week after that. So lots coming up. And then Bathhouse back tomorrow. We got an all-new episode of The Bathhouse. We got Dave Temple joining us, Chloe LeBranch, and maybe some others. So without further ado, Damn, the echo in here is wild. I didn't notice it, but I can hear when I certain frequencies in this studio. We have really high ceilings in here. And anyways, do any of you care? Do you even hear it? Probably not. Give me 1 second here while I set this up. And hold on. Let's bring them on. Ask to start video. Let me do this up. Hold on. Oh, look at me. Hey, there we are. Can you hear me, Mikhail?
Yes, I can.
Oh,
are we broadcasting?
Yeah, there's a serious echo though. Oh yeah. Oh, hold on a second. Is that me?
Yes, I can. It's your echo.
That is so weird. Somehow, on my phone, it started playing the episode that we're currently listening to. I was like, what the hell is going on? All right. I thought I was having an aneurysm, but everything is well. Welcome to the show, Mikhail. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
Now I can't hear you at all.
That's your issue, not mine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There is a little bit of a echo, but I don't know what that might be. But all right, we'll figure it out. It's all good. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, thanks for joining the show. I appreciate you coming on. So you are one of the premier figures in the Russian Libertarian Party. Is that correct?
That's correct. Well, yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Good. So tell us about yourself. I guess just like a little primer before we kind of get into it of just like who you are and.
All right. So I'm probably Russia's most prominent libertarian. I organized some of the biggest political rallies in the modern history of Russia. Unfortunately, it's not possible to do anymore because of the war and the crackdown on the opposition that Putin did in 2020. But basically, I organized 5 rallies. The biggest one was 60,000 people in central Moscow. And if you Google online, rally in defense of Telegram, Telegram is the biggest messenger system in Russia. I organized that. And I also organized several big libertarian events, strictly libertarian events in Russia. I invited Hans Hermann Hoppe, who read a lecture in central Moscow. You can watch his lecture on my YouTube channel. It was the biggest single libertarian lecture probably in the whole world. More than 1,500 people attended. Wow. It was a major event. And my own personal accomplishment, and probably the one I'm most proud of, is I gave a series of lectures across Russia, lectures on libertarianism, on libertarian theory, on libertarian philosophy, economy as well, an Austrian School of Economy. And I've read lectures in over 70 cities of Russia, from Kaliningrad to Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, so from the very east of Russia to the very west of Russia.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my proudest achievement. And I think of all the, I'm the only opposition figure who's accomplished something like that. So I'm pretty proud of that. Unfortunately, right now, I'm in exile in Brazil. I'm designated foreign agent by the Putin's government. I spent several months in jail in total, like in small batches, but I spent several months in jail. And I had I also opened a New Sincerity Club in Russia. It functioned for a little bit less than a year. It was a libertarian club, a beautiful place, but it was closed for political reasons as well. And you can watch some pictures online. It was a grand mansion, very beautiful. I was very proud of it. It was meant to be like the center of attraction for a libertarian, for libertarian-minded people in Russia, and to spark the political discussion. But unfortunately, in Putin's Russia in 2020, it was not meant to exist for very long.
Right.
So yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And so when you started trying to get that off the ground, like, did you have a lot of opposition right away? Because obviously, for people that don't, I guess, know, but they know that like it's not like a democratic system like it might be in America or in the West, obviously in Russia, but it's like a fake democracy, right? Like they do have elections, but they're just
those are sham. These are sham elections, and they've been like that for at least 15 years, maybe more than that. So it's more akin to something that they have in China, or, well, I wouldn't compare it to North Korea, but it's pretty bad still. So they have an event that they call elections, but only a certain people are allowed on the ballot. Only certain parties are allowed to be a party. So we are called the Libertarian Party of Russia, but we're not officially registered, and there's no way for us to actually get on the ballot in the modern Russia. So it was not possible 3 years ago. And today basically my entire team, people who worked on the rally, who helped me organize the rallies, who helped me organize and open the club, they're also in exile, some of them in Georgia, the country of Georgia, some of them in Poland, others in Spain. So we're all scattered around the world today, unfortunately, because Russia today is a very scary place.
Yeah. And is there anybody still there doing this, or is it just there's no real way to
No, there are some people who are left in Russia, but they were less prominent in the movement. And basically today, everyone is scared of doing anything. So we're just waiting for the war to be over, and hopefully maybe some political life will be back to Russia, but it's a hope. It's not a certainty.
Yeah. And so there's no way is there any mechanism in place where you could ever actually get on a ballot, or no? That's like total pipe.
I mean, theoretically speaking,
theoretically, I mean, yeah, I guess
theoretically Russia has a constitution. Theoretically, Russia has a rule of law, but in practice, no, there's no way. No way
at all. Interesting. So you and when did you start the Libertarian Party there?
I did. I'm not.
Or not started. Sorry, but started involved with it.
So I got involved almost at the beginning. So I'm not the founder of Libertarian Party of Russia, but I basically joined like a couple of months after it was founded. So I've been a member since 2010, and the party exists since late 2009, I believe. I'm not sure about my chronology, but so yeah, I've been involved in libertarian movement since very early stages of existence of the party.
And what specifically made you want to get into that? Because I feel like libertarianism, for the way that Russia's set up politically, is like a pretty far reach almost, in the sense where you're like, you almost want
but that's what makes people dream. And if you remember Ayn Rand, she was not a libertarian, but she came from Russia, and her experience of living in a totalitarian state actually fueled her love for liberty. And it's kind of the same way. So because everything is so bad, like every time I give a lecture, people ask me, where do you think a libertarian revolution is most likely? And I'd say, places like Russia, because in countries where people are comfortable, in countries where they have a functional political system, people are much more conservative. They're much more reluctant to change things. And in places like Russia, in places where people are upset and where there is no means of, influencing the government, the chances of a radical idea taking a hold over the people's minds and a territory is much stronger. That's why Bolsheviks won and communists won in Russia, and that's why they won in China, and they didn't prevail in other European countries, for example, because people were much more upset about their governments, and they were much more upset and disillusioned about changing the system from within. In Russia, nobody has illusions about changing a country from within. It's the system from within, because it's not possible. So radical ideas are much more popular, and you'd be surprised. I'd say Russia has, at least until recently, before the war, Russia had the biggest libertarian movement in the whole world after the US. So that's saying something.
Yeah. And what would you, I guess, see that looking like? Like if it were to take hold as an actual, like, what would it have to have, the chain of events that would have to occur in your mind in Russia for something like this to happen?
I take everything. I mean, I try to convince people that libertarian ideas are good. I try to, influence the minds of the younger generation, and I also try to explain that it doesn't matter how the opportunity will look like. We just have to seize it. So if it's going to be possible through democratic elections, let's run for the elections and let's try to win. If the country is going to collapse, well, we have to work with that. So I think the biggest mistake libertarians make in the US and everywhere else is that they don't prepare for each single scenario. And that's what we have to do. So it doesn't really matter, because what matters is that when the opportunity arises, we have to seize it.
Yeah. And how does
somebody else will yeah.
Right. And so how does the war play into this whole thing? Is it like, do you think it can kind of be a catalyst to maybe eventually get there sooner, or is it slowing the process down, or what?
Well, I think it's kind of both, paradoxically, because it's not possible to do any kind of political work in Russia anymore. Since the war started, the laws got much harsher, and basically everyone I knew is either in immigration or in jail, like literally in jail. And like a reason I left Russia is my close, well, not a close friend, but a friend nevertheless, Andrei Pivovarov. They was taken off the plane out of Russia and incarcerated, and he's been in jail for over 2 years now. So, and that's the day it happened. I actually left Russia because I understood that, it was getting really, really close. And basically anyone who tried to do anything in Russia is either in jail or in exile. So it's in that sense, it became more difficult, but also the change became more inevitable in a sense, because Putin got himself in a bind, and I don't see the system recovering after that. It doesn't mean Putin is going away tomorrow or in 2 years or in 10 years for that matter. It means that Putin's system is not sustainable in a longer term. It will have difficulties reinventing itself. And that's when the opportunity arises to change things. And I hope some of the libertarian ideas and some of the libertarians will be ready for the moment to use that opportunity to change Russia for better and move Russia towards a libertarian future.
Right. And would you go back in that scenario? Like, is there...
Absolutely, I would. Absolutely, I would. I go back to Russia the moment it wouldn't guarantee incarceration for me. Right. So I'm even ready to take risks. I'm just, I want them to be calculated risks. I don't want them to be, stupid risks. Yeah. So I will. I'll definitely going back.
And
once,
how do you... Yeah. How do you view Navalny and what he did? Because he basically did that, right? He went back knowing that he was about to be...
So what Navalny did was a gamble. So just to explain to your audience, Alexei Navalny is like the biggest opposition leader in Russia, and he survived the assassination attempt by the Russian government, and he risked everything, gambled, and tried to go back to Russia, even though he was constantly pressured not to come back and was guaranteed incarceration. In his case, I'd say it was a calculated risk, but it was a huge gamble nevertheless. So there was like a slight chance that he might prevail. He hoped that the streets will rise, and he hoped that maybe he received some guarantees that maybe he'll get some support from someone who means something in Russia. But it didn't. But it didn't happen, and he'll be jailed until Putin is in power. There's no way he's going out. No way.
Yeah. And do you think, does Putin have some sort of like succession plan? Like in the event that, say, he were to, because, they have all these speculations about him, that his health and all this stuff, he's in poor health. I don't know if that's true.
He's unfortunately, these rumors has been spread since like 10, 15 years ago. No, he's in a great health. I mean, he's an old man, but he's in much better shape than Joe Biden, for example. And that's pretty obvious just by looking at him. So he may still be around in 10 years. And that's what I'm bracing myself for. To answer your question, if he has a succession plan, I don't think he does, at least not the obvious one. I think the best succession plan that he has is the FSB. FSB is the Federal Security Bureau of Russia, the the organization which was created instead of KGB, is that this institution will take over after he dies or something happens to him. But there's no obvious person who can take over him, and that's his biggest mistake and the biggest flaw of his system.
Yeah. Does Russia have term limits?
Well,
I mean,
yes,
do they technically have term limits? I'm sure.
Yeah, but basically he rewrote the constitution 2 years ago and he reset his limits, so he can he can stay president as long as he like.
And does he have to just keep resetting it in perpetuity, or
he doesn't have to? He doesn't have to. I mean, he has like according to new constitution and the reset, he has another 12 years. So, he's good. He's good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess so. You've been arrested how many times there?
Well, I've been arrested. Like to go back, like about 5 times, but not for very long. The longest I spent in jail, the longest I spent in jail was 30 days. So,
and they arrest you for what's the law that they say you're breaking?
They just keep inventing laws. And basically, I was arrested for organizing one of the rallies that I mentioned earlier. And the way it happened is I was invited to talk to the mayor's representative, who tried to convince me to relocate the rally to a different spot. And there's a big reason why I refused to do that, because people invested their trust in me, because it had a symbolic meaning why the rally should not have been relocated. So I refused after the conversation. And basically, the moment I exited the government building, I was apprehended by the police and jailed. So they gave some formal reason why they were doing it, but the real reason is that I refused to cooperate with the government.
Right. And is that you say it was in the city? Is it similar
in the center city?
So is it the municipal government was the one that's arresting you, or was it because I imagine it comes from the top.
No, it comes from the top. But the people who were arresting me were, it's called OMON. It's basically the special forces who do that, who does that. So it doesn't matter who arrests you, because the decision to arrest me came from above.
Right. And then what happens once that occurs? Is it totally just to scare you? You have a court date?
It depends how important you are. And basically, I was always protected, and everyone else was always protected by Alexei Navalny, because basically we always knew that when terrible things will start happening, they will first start happening to him, and only then they will start to affect us. And it actually turned out to be true. He was the first one to go in jail, and now everyone is in jail or in exile. So the way it happens is that they arrest you, they try to scare you, and I actually had an operative trying to talk to me, telling me why do I do that, and they know all this batch of information on me they're gonna publish, and I just ignored that. And then they just lock you up, have some sham process, so it's just as bad as you imagine it. And you just the moment they arrest you, you know that you're going to go in jail for the amount of time that they actually demand you to be incarcerated for. There's no way to dispute the accusation. There's no way to prove innocence. It just doesn't exist in Russia.
Yeah, and there's no trial or anything. You don't have a lawyer.
You have a lawyer, you have a trial, but it's just he can't do anything. Yes. And basically, one of my friends, who's a very famous blogger in Russia, Mark Fagin, he's a politician as well. He became a bit pro-Ukrainian recently, but it doesn't matter. He used to be a lawyer in Russia. And basically, he said it first, that in Russia, a lawyer has to be a public speaker, because the only hope for the lawyer to soften the sentence for the defendant is to go public and try to amass the public support and public dissent in the hope of influencing the decision. Because in the courtroom, nothing gets decided in the courtroom, unfortunately.
It's just all public opinion. And
it's all public opinion.
I guess you probably have some, unique insight into the war. So I mean, I guess what is there an official position by the Libertarian Party on the war? And
the war is criminal. Yeah, the war is criminal, and Putin is the only perpetrator. So it's very straightforward. I'm actually upset with the American libertarians and the way the position they took to the with the whole war thing, because you can be critical of your own government, sending money to Ukraine. I understand that. You can be skeptical about your government getting involved in another foreign war. I totally get that. You can be, you can refuse or criticize or whatever, you rally public support against sending money to Ukraine. No problem. But the moment you start to repeat Putin's propaganda, comparing Zelensky to Hitler and you're talking about the Nazis in Ukraine, you just become a useful fool, and it has nothing to do with your libertarianism. So I was very upset with the Libertarian Party of the US recently, and they became, in a sense, to a degree, they became what they always fought against. Remember, there was a meme that about the left, that everyone who left doesn't like is Hitler, and somehow, Libertarian Party of the US appropriated the same kind of lingo in the last 16 months in regard of the war in Ukraine. So it really upset me. Yeah. So the official position of Libertarian Party of Russia is that Putin is the war is criminal. Putin is the side who is responsible for sparking that war. And the Ukraine, it has a lot of problems. I was never a fan of the Ukrainian government. It's incredibly corrupt. But there were, obviously, like in every country, you have some Nazis, but Ukraine never had a Nazi government. This idea is preposterous. It's just ridiculous. It has no roots in reality. I was in Ukraine just a couple of years before the war in 2020, and I was actually invited to give a speech in Kiev. And I'm a Russian politician. I'm a Russian libertarian. I don't speak Ukrainian. I spoke only Russian, and I was welcomed there. And there was no Nazism there. Just don't repeat that. It's Putin's propaganda. It's like the lowest tier of Putin's propaganda.
Yeah, I think that really took off, the whole Nazis in Ukraine thing, because everybody here on the left, they would literally they were calling everybody that they didn't agree with, like what you said, they were calling them all Nazis, right? And then all those people then sided with the Ukrainians in this war. So then everybody on the other side was like, hey, what about, they would have those, whatever those patches are. I don't know, like the sun patch. And
no, they have some. They have
like some, like nobody's like they're like Hitler's Germany, but I think a lot of people were just like annoyed by the hypocrisy of the thing, where you're like, you're calling, like I live in New York, but I'm from Canada, and if like the trucker thing in Ottawa, the trucker protest, they were like, all those people are Nazis, and they're like, okay, well, what about them? And they're like, no, they're not, because we side. So people, I think, are just frustrated. I don't think people are really like, oh, those are literal Nazis and they're the bad guys. I think it's more of an opposition tactic against the people who were calling them Nazis, to say like, well, you're a hypocrite now. So anyways,
I get what you're saying, and I think it's perfectly fine to bring a light to this hypocrisy. It's just at one point it felt like it was a genuinely held belief by the libertarians in the U.S. and it really upset me.
Yeah, and what's the general consensus among Russians, like for the war? Like, did they still because I don't, you hear polls, but it's hard to, I guess, take polls at face value.
No, you really shouldn't. So basically, it got a little bit worse in the last 15 months or 16 months since the war started, because I think a lot of sanctions that were imposed on Russia, they hit in the wrong spot. So people feel like the sanctions were leveraged against them and not against the Putin's cronies. And that's a big, huge discussion that is actually taking place in Russia right now, because Russia being disconnected from Visa and MasterCard. We can't monetize our YouTube videos anymore, and some of the big retailers left Russia. But at the same time, you have those Putin's cronies, people who worked on forging Russian constitutions, living in the European countries, visiting the US, and it happens all the time. And people see that and they get upset with the West. And I think they have a reason to be upset, because I think the stance that the US took in the first months of war was incredibly dumb, and I'd say that it best illustrated by Michael Muckfall. He used to be an ambassador of the US in Russia, so basically he started to blame Russian people for the war. instead of the government, and that was a huge mistake and resonated it actually boosted, I'd say not boosted support of Putin, but it's boosted skepticism towards the West and towards the forces that support the Ukraine. I think American and the Western messaging got better in the last couple of months, but a lot of time has been lost. So to answer your question, people are afraid of the war in Russia. In general, they are brainwashed by the Putin's propaganda, and unfortunately, Putin's propaganda get a lot of ammunition from the Western media as well, because Western media was trying for the longest time to sort of force the responsibility for the war onto the people and move it away from the government. Not move it away from the government, but to mix the two. And in Russia, where there was no free and fair election for the longest time, people don't necessarily associate themselves with the government. And the biggest talking point that the Kremlin use is they say that, you and us, we're together, and whatever disaster is gonna be brought upon the government is gonna be brought upon the people as well, and all of a sudden, the Western media started to repeat the same thing. Russians are to blame. Russia is responsible for the war, not Putin, not his cronies, not the government, not the politicians with whom a lot of Western elites still have shared business affairs. They still meet each other. They are still on friendly terms. But the same people who are in today are really helpless to change anything. So there is no, I wouldn't say there is a wide support for the war, but I'd say that in the last 16 months, sympathy for the Ukraine and for the West waned, and that's a big media fuck up. I'm sorry to say that.
You can, we're just on YouTube. You can definitely swear away. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's any? Because I just saw in the past week there have been there was drone strikes in Moscow. Yep. Do you think that'll? Because wasn't there an impression that none of this would ever reach the cities to that degree, the war would never really reach there, or were they promised that?
So just one thing you need to understand about the drone attacks in Russia, it's purely for headlines. Sorry, I forgot the word. Headlines. Yeah, there we go. So it's purely for headlines. They don't cause any damage. They're not. Fortunately, they don't manage to kill anyone as well. So it's purely I wouldn't even call it a terror attack. Nobody takes it serious. It just looks good in the media, to say that, hey, we are capable of hitting Moscow as well. So I wouldn't take that particularly seriously. I'd say Ukraine has been very successful at stalling Putin's army in the first months of war. And I think it surprised everyone. And that's why Ukraine managed to rally so much support behind themselves. But in the last couple of months, they were stalling themselves, and they couldn't. Their counteroffensive that they were been talking about for months didn't really achieve anything. So now they're trying to save face by this kind of media bluster and by claiming that they can hit Moscow. But no, don't take drone attacks in Moscow seriously yet. Once you see the destruction, once you see at least a single building getting actually damaged and not just losing its windows, then it's gonna feel like an actual war. But not yet. I'd say fortunately, because I don't want to see the war coming to Moscow.
And so you're still in contact, I imagine, with many people who are in Russia.
Of course, yeah. I ran my own media outlet. It's called SVTV News. It's actually the second biggest libertarian news outlet in the world after Reason. Nobody knows about it except the Russians. So
and they have full access. They have full access to it. In Russia?
No, we've been banned. We've been banned about a year ago, but people use VPN, and most of our readers are from Russia anyway. So, sorry, can you repeat your question?
I was saying because I was actually going to ask something related to the whole thing with
Prigozhin. I'm in touch.
Prigozhin.
I'm in touch with people. I'm in touch with people in Russia.
Yeah,
that was your question.
Oh, okay, yeah. So with the whole story with Prigozhin, like, did you have any different insight? Because that seemed to be like the biggest story here for 48 hours. Then it just disappeared. Like it literally just like went away.
Just disappeared.
You know, you turn on CNN or Fox News, they're like, "Oh, this is it. Like it's the end of the war. It'll be over within 24 hours." And then, you know, everybody was just caught kind of blindsided a bit that it just kind of went away. Do you have any insight into that?
I think you know as much as I do because Kremlin, like the political system in Russia, is very opaque. We don't really know, who holds the power. We know Putin is in charge, but that's basically the extent of it. So we don't know who has more influence on him, who has power in the system. So to answer your question, Prigozhin is still very much part of the establishment, which surprises me. And he hasn't been expelled. He has been present in the Russian Russian African conference that took place a couple of days ago. He was taking pictures with some African delegates there, and that was a big deal because it means he's still in Moscow. He still feels safe, appearing in official environment. So, but he lost a lot of his influence. Basically, the Wagner Group is not as influential as it was a month ago, and it's not going to be influential anymore. That's a certain. So, Prigozhin lost his gamble, but what was his gamble exactly is actually very hard to discern.
Yeah. Because it seems like for what he did, you would think for what people I think about Russia that's a death sentence. To go against Putin.
But you see, that's the problem with the Kremlin system is that it's so opaque. We don't really understand, what is actually going on. Like I have no good explanation why Prigozhin is still free, why he's still holds any kind of influence within Putin's circles. Because to me, what he did looks like a betrayal, like a blasphemy. Yeah. But apparently he holds some of the cards, and it's not as easy to expel him as it is to jail, for example, Igor Strelkov. Igor Strelkov is one of the original architects of the war with Ukraine. He was critical of the way the war was going on, and he was critical of the Prigozhin coup as well. But he's the one who is in jail right now, and Prigozhin is a free man appearing in the on the official conferences. So I don't have a good explanation what is going on with Prigozhin. Really,
I was meaning to actually ask you regarding the jail stuff. So, when you got arrested, are you arrested for the same thing every time? Is it literally
no? It depends. It depends. So, like sometimes you are arrested for the same thing every time. Sometimes they invent something new if it's convenient. So it really it's just a pretext. So it doesn't matter what you are being arrested for. What matters, what was the actual reason for you to be arrested? And usually it is you're trying to organize a rally, or you had a successful, lecture tour, like it happened with me, or something happened. Like the most exciting thing that happened to me was when I was going to read a lecture in I forgot the name of the city. God, why? Sorry, just give me a second.
Yeah, no problem. By the way, the phone lines are open, everybody. 1-888-949.
Yeah, in Kemerovo. So I was going to read a lecture in Kemerovo just after was a big fire tragedy, and with a lot of people and children died in the fire accident. And I flew in Kemerovo airport, and I was actually kidnapped for several hours. They took away my documents. They locked me in the room. They started beating me up and basically put me on the plane back to Russia, on the empty plane back to not to Russia, to Moscow, on the empty plane back to Moscow. So it doesn't. That's just to illustrate that it doesn't matter. The official pretext doesn't matter. What matters is why they are upset with you, right. And they're going to use any means necessary to get rid of you. Even kidnapping would work.
Okay, all right. We got a call. 1 second here, Mikhail. Hello, thanks for calling Low Value Mail. 1 moment, please. Hello.
Yeah.
Hey, you are on with Mikhail. Who am I speaking with?
This is Aaron from Ohio. I called you.
Aaron from Ohio. How's it going? Mikhail, just hey, Aaron, 1 second. Mikhail, just so you know, I forgot to mention this to you earlier. When people call in, there's going to be like a 5-second delay where you can't hear me. Just don't worry about it. It's just Zoom.
Okay.
Anyways, Aaron, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask Mikhail, what does he think will happen? Well, 2 questions, if I can. What does he think will happen if Putin, once Putin finally is out of power, who will fill that power vacuum? And also his thoughts on Snowden over there. That's all.
All right, thanks.
So I actually have thank you. Thank you very much for the question. I'm actually I want to answer the Snowden question first. I think it's a tragedy that the only place where Edward Snowden found refuge is Putin's Russia. I think it's a travesty. I think it puts to shame every other Western government, and it just shows how much trouble the whole world is in. Because a genuine whistleblower, a person who exposed government crime and the global surveillance system against the American citizens, couldn't find refuge in any decent country and had to look for refuge in Putin's Russia. So Snowden is living his life in Moscow as well as he can, given the circumstances. He's not cooperating with the Russian government. He's not divulging. He's not exposing any secrets, and whatever secrets he has are 10 years old at this point. So I'm just upset with that. He couldn't find. He was not provided asylum in a decent, at least in a Western country. Yeah.
Do you know why Putin is allowing that, or
because he doesn't care? He just to spite the U.S. That's the only
that's
reason.
Just like a spite. That's what it seems like. Because it's just to spite them, saying, "Hey, you want this guy? We'll protect him."
Absolutely. Oh. And to answer your first question, what was it about? I'm sorry.
About the power vacuum.
It was. Who will fill the power vacuum whenever Putin is either removed from power or dies or whatever happens to Putin? There's going to be a power vacuum. Who do you think will fill that? Will it be Prigozhin and the Wagner Group, or some other?
Prigozhin had his shot. So Prigozhin is out of the picture. He got too many people scared, and he was never a popular figure within the establishment anyway. So he was always critical of the establishment, and he was always his own guy. He was never ingrained in Russian institutions. So no, Prigozhin is out of the picture. There's still and I also think that it's too early to say that without Putin's system is going to collapse. There are still some institutions that exist in Russia. They just look very different from what you're used to in the West. For example, the FSB, the Federal Security Bureau, is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly well organized, and that's where Putin came from. And it's capable of installing, if necessary, it's capable of installing a kind of a junta, at least for a while, to keep things under control. And also, I just mentioned earlier that political system in Russia is very opaque. We don't really understand who the main actors are. Like the situation with Prigozhin, it took everyone by surprise, and the way it unfolded took everyone by surprise. And we don't really know who are the main actors. So we know Putin is important, but his surrounding is much less obvious. So to answer your question, it's not a given that after Putin dies, the system is going to collapse. It might as well reinvent itself because it has this backbone of FSB, and it actually survives not on law. It survives on the kind of a Cosa Nostra kind of thing. So it's more of a mafia kind of arrangement.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, is that why would we assume that things would be better if Putin was gone and we don't have someone even more crazy in there after he's gone? That's what he's
what he's leveraging against the world, and that's actually the strategy that every tyrant used to survive. That's what Assad did in Syria, for example. So he basically destroyed all the opposition. He destroyed everyone who could theoretically take his place, and then presented you with the alternative. It's either I or the ISIS. And Putin, he does kind of the same thing in Russia. So he gets rid of anyone who might potentially threaten his power, in a hope that he will remain the only alternative. So to answer your question, yeah, there's no guarantee that whoever comes after Putin will not be as even worse. But that's exactly the conclusion that Putin wants you to make as well.
Interesting.
So, do you think regime change is a good or bad policy? If say the West is promoting regime change in Russia, are you behind that or not behind that?
To be honest, I think whatever hopes at regime change the West had in Russia, it lost after Navalny got in jail and after the war started and the sanctions were leveraged against Russia. So I don't think it's it's attainable option at all. I mean, we don't know everything, and there might be some Manchurian candidate, somewhere in Kremlin, but I'd say it's highly unlikely. And I can answer a slightly different question. I think the West is terrified of revolution in Russia. And I think the West has every reason to be terrified, because as bad as Putin is predictable, and he's much more and he's much more convenient for the West than whomever might take his place, or even worse, if Russia is going to collapse, in 50 different states, you'll get at least 10 of these states going to possess nuclear weapons, and at least some of these states will have its own private military company like the Wagner. And what's going to happen then? Yeah, you might not have a war in Ukraine, but you'll have like a million other wars somewhere on the periphery that the West won't be able to maintain or contain. So the West doesn't want the revolution in Russia. It would like to have a regime change, but I don't think the West has a candidate right now.
Yeah, there you go. Anything else, caller?
Hey, well, thank you.
All right, thanks for calling. Appreciate it.
And that's the reason. Just to add one thing, that's the reason why the West is not fully behind Ukraine. And I'm pretty sure you've seen all the headlines about the West not sending all the weapons that Ukraine needs, trying to prevent it from getting hold of the weapons that they can actually use to attack Moscow or cities within Russia. And the reason why is because the West doesn't have a strategy for Russia after Putin. They don't have a candidate there. They don't have a force that has changed, that has a chance of, a democratic force that has changed, of overthrowing Putin.
Yeah, like they might do all this and then to no benefit,
because it's easy to wreak chaos in Russia, but it's much harder to face the consequences of said chaos, and the US understands that, I think.
Did all the sanctions and stuff, did that actually bring the Russian people for the most part closer together to a degree?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. The sanctions were a mistake. The way they were forced onto Russia was purely. It was, first of all, it was a media disaster, and it was an economic disaster as well, because it hit all the wrong people. So it made people unite around Putin. It helped Putin unite economy around himself, which is a less obvious talking point, but I think it's just as important, because by cutting Russia off SWIFT, by cutting Russia off Visa and MasterCard, what the West effectively did, they trapped the money within Russia. So whomever wanted, to transfer money onto their foreign bank accounts, to emigrate, to take money out of the Putin's economy and out of the military economy, were not able to do that, but not because Putin prevented them from doing it, but because the West prevented them from doing that. And that's just the moment it happened, I just couldn't fathom what they were thinking, because it's such an idiotic decision. And we're still reaping consequences of that decision, because
I was going to say, the reason I know about you is because I have this kid who makes my clips. He makes clips for me for like, Instagram and whatever. And when I hired him, it said he was in Amsterdam. And then he one day he's like, he got kicked off of Upwork, and he's like, I'm actually in Russia, and he's like, and there's no way for you to pay me. And we've eventually figured it out, but he told me about you, and he's really into your stuff. And so anyways, but yeah, he was just like, it sucks. He's like, I can't get it.
It sucks. And hit all the wrong people. It hit the kind of people who actually try to leave Russia. It hit people who try to move their money out of Russia, not to pay taxes, not to sponsor the war. And the West did it. The craziest thing is that it was not because Putin, mobilized the economy. It was the West who mobilized Russian economy around Putin. And it still doesn't make any sense to me. There's no explanation. It's idiotic.
Very odd. Okay, we got another caller. One moment, please. Hello. Thanks for calling Low Value Mail. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, this is Dylan.
Dylan. All right, hold on 1 second while we put you through. And Dylan, you were on with Mikhail. Go ahead.
Hey, Mikhail, good to speak with you. Just because I've heard it been mentioned a couple times, I want to kind of bring up this guy. I don't know if you know much about him, but his name is Vladislav Surkov, and he's basically the architect behind that sovereign democracy that's been talked about, like with the. Sorry if you hear my cat, he's freaking out. That like he that you don't really know what's going on. The political, it's like political theater, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. So you just want to comment on Vladislav Surkov? He used to work for the administration of the president in the late noughties and the early 10s. And he is the architect. He's in the mastermind of the, I'd say, of the modern Putin's political system. He generated all the ideas, but he's very much out of the picture today. He fell off the grace in 2015, I'd say, right. And he's been a shadow, he's been in the shadows since then. So he's not influential anymore. And I'd say people like him are too sophisticated for the modern political system in Russia. So he. So like today, the political system in Russia is much more simple than in Surkov's time. So in Surkov's time, there was a theater, there was, intrigue. It was interesting to follow the politics of Kremlin. It was interesting to follow. Today, it's much more straightforward. You don't get this kind of Byzantine political sophistication. Today, read the public telegrams and official statements that Russia posts today. There's no sophistication there. It's just extremely dumb and extremely direct. Unfortunately, Surkov is much more.
Do you know why they got rid of him?
Much more sophisticated.
Was there a reason why he was? Was there a reason why he was removed?
Basically, he was okay. There's several reasons. First of all, after the 2011 and 2012, there was a period of big social unrest in central Moscow. There were big rallies, the biggest in Putin's history in modern Russia at the time. And Surkov was supposed to prepare organizations to prevent exactly these kind of events from happening. That was the main reason, the first reason why he was removed from power. And the second reason why is because he was arrogant, like his personality he's extremely intelligent, and he just didn't fit the kind of entourage that Putin was surrounding himself with. Surkov was dangerous. Because he was intelligent, because he was smart, because he was sophisticated, because he worked with ideas and he generated ideas. That's not what Putin likes. That's not what he wants. Putin wants to surround himself with the yes men, with the people who are who don't have their own personality, because Putin doesn't feel threatened by them. And to go back to the Prigozhin case that we discussed, and the big outcome of his coup attempt is that Prigozhin was actually leaked through the cracks. It was a charismatic leader who was fairly independent, who was given this great independence dependency within private military group. He was not accountable to anyone. And look how it happened. Coup happened. And if you followed closely, his statements that Prigozhin was highly critical of Russian Ministry of Defense. And Russian Ministry of Defense is exactly the kind of person Putin trusts entirely. It's someone who has no opinion, someone who has no popularity of his own, someone who has no internal support within Russian system, within the political system, or among the people as well. And the big outcome of the coup is that Prigozhin was stripped of his power. So yeah, for some reason he still remains in Moscow, but he's not the same he's not the same man he was before the coup. Okay. And Surkov to Putin, it's trouble. Like people like him are trouble because they have too much ideas, they have too much intelligence, they think they are smarter than the system, and the system does not tolerate people like that.
Okay. Anything else, caller?
A couple things real quick. Reason Prigozhin's still alive, someone needs to get Putin's hot dogs, all right? So, Vladislav Surkov also wrote a book under the name Natan Dubovitsky, I believe.
Yes, he did. Did.
Yeah, and he writes articles and whatnot. But I just want to ask real quick.
He writes poetry as well.
Oh, really? Okay. I'll have to check some of that out. Sorry.
You got?
As far as like you hear a lot of these, like a lot of people try to say like Russia is like this based Christian nation, and I don't want to get you in too much trouble, hopefully, but like, like Russia leads, but they have the highest rate of abortion, and like they're pretty high in the rates of like HIV. I don't even think Putin really practices Christianity.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. He practices Chabad, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I don't think he practices anything. But I think it's one of the most effective propaganda points that Kremlin actually managed to instill into the Western audience, is that Russia somehow is this champion of traditional Western values, and it can't be further from the truth. Like Putin does not believe in Christ. He does not practice religion. He's not a conservative man. He divorced. Nobody knows who his children are, but even that doesn't matter. Like the best example of the kind of perversity that Putin did, of the perversion of the Christian faith in Russia under Putin, is the Cathedral of Ministry of Defense. Just Google it, and it's an incredible place. It looks like something out of Warhammer. It has a communist star and hammer and sickle on its frescoes and on its stained glass within the body of church. Like, can you imagine that? That's blasphemy. But that's the kind of religion that Putin practices. It has within the body of church, this church, there is a Hitler's hat being stored under the glass, because it's like this important war trophy within the body of church. Let me remind you. It has frescoes of Bolshevik leaders and Stalin and Lenin. It was drawn on the walls, and then after a huge scandal, it was removed. But it doesn't matter. Like the idea didn't just cross their mind; they tried to implement it. So just Google it. It's a crazy place, and that's the kind of that's what people in the West mean when they talk about Russia being this bastion of Christianity. No, it is not. Russian people in general are quite atheist because of the Soviet era, because of the most of them are agnostics, and Putin, like he doesn't. I'm not sure even the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church believes in Christ, because what they do with the church and within the body of church is blasphemous, and there's no explanation. Again, Google Cathedral of Ministry of Defense of Russia. Just look at the pictures. It tells all the story you need to know.
When was it built?
It was built about 5 years ago, I think. It's a fairly recent building, but again, just the idea of a hammer and sickle and a communist star and communist leaders being depicted on frescoes of a church should terrify you. Tell you everything you need to know about the state that the church is in.
That's pretty wild. All right, thanks, caller. All right, we got another call here. One moment, please. Hello. Thanks for calling Low Value Mail. Appreciate your patience. I know you've been trying to get through. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, Danny. This is Jay from California.
Jay from California. One moment, please. All right, you're on with Mikhail. Go ahead.
Hey, Mikhail. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
So I have a question to ask you concerning the Nord Stream pipeline. What are your ideas, or what do you think about the fact that the Western media really is not covering it or making it seem like it's not really a big deal?
Well, the Western media is, I think, discredited itself in the last 20 years immensely. So I'm not surprised they're not covering it. If you're asking who blew it up, I'm pretty sure it was either Americans or the Ukrainians under the American command. I don't think Russia did it. There's nothing Putin has to gain from blowing up the Nord Stream. There's no motive for the Putin to do it. I'm pretty sure the Americans did it, and I understand why they cover it up, because it's an attack on a NATO state within the NATO waters, and there's no good explanation why it happened. It might get Germany upset as well, because Germany still is under the impression that after the war will end, maybe they'll find some common language with Putin, and that puts an end to it. So yeah, I'm pretty sure Americans did it, or the Ukrainians under the American command did it. I'm not surprised the Western media doesn't write about it, because there's a lot of stories that Western media didn't cover that should have been covered in the last 10 years at least.
But it's one of those things that it seems like it's going to affect everything in the future, and also it's supposed to be one of the biggest environmental, it just leaks in history, and it's just something that no one really cares about. And it's something that is, I would think, with people being so obsessed with climate change and humans, and it just seems like this one thing is pretty big, and it's just completely being glossed over, I think, by many sides.
Almost as if climate change is a moral panic, and is used by the establishment and is used by the establishment, to advance their agenda. So yeah, I'm not surprised, because I've seen it many times, and like the kind of war that is taking place in Ukraine, and the collapse of the hydroelectric dam there, and the constant tension. These are all natural disasters are in the making. And in case of a hydroelectric dam, it's already happened. So nobody talks about it as well, because it's not convenient. And the point of global
the hydroelectric
warming,
dam, I didn't even know about. Which hydroelectric dam? This is insane.
It was in the news, all over the news, actually, for a while at least. Zaporozhskaya hydroelectric dam.
Oh, yeah. That was in the news for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
it was in Ukraine.
Yeah, in Ukraine. Yeah,
wow,
that's what I'm talking about. So
okay,
yeah, go on.
Okay, so but with all of the coverage being for the longest time, everybody here, at least in California, had their Ukraine flags out on the street and was like, "We bleed blue and yellow," and we're just. Mm-hmm. And now it's kind of gone. I don't want to see the opposite direction, but people are like, "We want results. We want to see." I think it's just people are more aware of facts now, maybe, than they were in, say, like Afghanistan and Iraq, where people were blindly sending their children and blindly sending their money. And we know about more things now.
Well, it's a different time information-wise. Like, just access to information was different then.
That's true, but there's also a factor of a learned experience. So basically, I think Putin made a huge gift to the Western establishment by starting this war, because it instantaneously explained to a lot of European countries, at least, why they need NATO. And if you have read what Emmanuel Macron said about NATO just like a year before the war started, is that NATO was losing its meaning. The organization didn't pursue the didn't pursue the intents that it was originally built to protect, et cetera, and now the Europe understands really well why it needs NATO, because they have a very simple enemy that is threatening their existence. But to answer your question about support of Ukraine, because it's easy to support someone who is winning, it's much harder to support a side that is not capable of reaching its goals. And Ukraine a year ago was a country that successfully stopped Putin's aggression. Nobody expected that. Zelensky, in the first months of war, he was actually a competent leader. And the way he stayed in Kiev, even though every single advisor from the West advised him to move to Poland or somewhere else, was an act of bravery. And people loved him for that.
I completely agree. It just seems like with Zelensky, he's a bit of a, I don't want to say a stooge, but at this point it's like, bro, change your shirt. Like, I get it. I get it. Course. But it's gotten to the point where it's.
Of course, and you are completely right. And I was saying that in the first months of war and trying to explain it to my audience is that Putin's greatest weapon is time. And this Chinese proverb is that, if you wait long enough, you'll see the body of your dead enemy, flowing down the river. And that's the tactic that Putin has been using against his enemies for the longest time. He thinks time is on his side. He thinks that he can weather any crisis because he doesn't concern himself with costs.
Because he has up to this point, correct?
Yeah, of course, and that's what I'm saying.
George Bush was friends with him. I'm old enough to remember when they were like, "Look at this guy; he's a good guy." And it's like, to be someone alive now and seeing like, "Oh, we never said that." I'm just like, wow, I remember. I remember the West was pretty good friends after the early 2000s, the late 90s.
Yeah, and Putin was a different man back then. And I think the West did a lot of mistakes, to be honest. Like, I think the biggest mistake is not trying to lure Putin into NATO. I know it sounds odd to the American citizens and you hate NATO and you have every reason to hate it.
It sounds crazy to me. It sounds crazy.
Yeah, but there was a moment in time in the early noughties, in like 2001 to 2004, like right after the 9/11, when the Bush was very close with Putin, when Putin entertained the idea of joining NATO, and he actually was waiting to be not invited, but to start the negotiations. But the invitation never came, and I think there's a window in time when it was possible for a few years, 3 years maybe. And I wish the diplomats realized that. And I think the history of the world would have turned completely different if it happened. But to reiterate,
I don't think Western leaders were sincere about it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think either.
May have gotten wise
either.
to that.
Yeah, I don't think either. I think Putin was at the time he was. Under the impression that the West was sincere. I think he was naive
because he saw what
degree.
they did to Gaddafi. I hear that he watches, I don't know if this is just Western propaganda or who this comes from, but that he watches the video of Gaddafi being stabbed with a knife up his ass every morning to kind of remind him, this is what will happen to you if you lose to the West.
That's fucked up to watch that every morning.
I'd be pretty scared if I was him, because there's no exit plan for this guy. When you lose to us, we put a knife up your butt.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I repeat that myself many times, not in regards of Gaddafi, but that if you don't give someone like Putin an exit plan, then he will find till the last man to stay in power, and that's one of many mistakes that the Western diplomats made in the last years in dealing with Putin. And the same goes in regards to this war. So basically, for Putin, this war is the war of survival, and he's in the position.
And it's been the war of survival for many other leaders. Syria, you brought up, and it seems like he was in a very similar position.
Of course, Assad is in a similar position, and it was a disaster. Whatever happened.
Children vacation here.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't know if you know that, but his son is always spotted in Hollywood in like nice cars with really pretty women.
Of course, he is, because the elite live by a different set of rules than the rest of us. So Putin is different from Assad in a sense that he possesses much more power, and he's capable of threatening the rest of the world, not just with the nuclear war, but with the threat of chaos is actually a very potent one. The one I mentioned before is that nobody wants to see Putin fail completely, because a complete failure of Putin regime can bring up all sorts of unintended consequences.
The end of the world.
That nobody wants. Well, not necessarily the end of the world, but all sorts of unintended consequences that nobody wants to deal with. And I think in Europe, people realize it a little bit better than the Americans, because they saw there was a lot of resentment towards the Tsarist Russia in the 19th century. And Europeans thought that it was a great idea, to sponsor a Bolshevik revolution, the communist revolution. They helped Lenin get back to Russia, all these sort of things. And they thought it was a great idea. And the result of the Bolshevik revolution was that they got a much bigger problem on their hands than whatever problem Tsarist
bigger than
Russia
Holocaust,
presented.
Bigger than anything.
But
I understand.
But I'm saying the occupation of half of Europe by the Bolsheviks. I'm talking about
no, you're right. Me being an
War.
American, I don't see it the same way. I have no skin in or not the same skin in the game as you do. Okay.
Yeah, but the Europeans feel it
guys.
really well.
Thank you for. I have to get back to work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, appreciate you.
It's been great. Thank you for being civil with me, and you guys have a good night.
Yeah, take care. Thanks for calling.
Good night. Yeah, but just to finish my thought, the Soviet Union presented a much bigger threat to the rest of the world and to Europe and to the United States than the Tsarist Russia. And this is something that the Europeans learned very well after the 20th century. And I think that's what's stopping the West today from supporting Ukraine to the fullest, because the collapse of Russia is not something anyone wants to see again.
Right. Okay, we got another call. One moment, please. Hello, thanks for calling Low Value Mail. Who am I speaking with?
It's Josh.
Josh, all right, 1 second while we patch you through. And you are on with Mikhail. Go ahead.
Hey, what's up, man? So I got a libertarian. I guess I'm not sure if you guys' principles are the same as here in the States.
Is there any? Sorry to cut you off there for a second.
Very
Josh.
much the same. Very much the same.
Are there any different principles between being a libertarian in Russia or versus?
No. We are Rothbardian libertarians, and actually, we had the very same schism within our party several years ago. The same kind that you had in Libertarian Party of Russia after the Mises Caucus took over. So we are very much aligned.
Okay. So I guess my question then, that's good to hear. As a fellow libertarian, actually, I was just listening to Dave Smith before I jumped on Nobel Mail. He's a big libertarian guy here in the States. We're very anti-war, and I would assume you are the same. So I don't know if you touched on it yet, but what is your ideas of the best way to end the war immediately and save lives?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Basically, negotiations have to start now. It was different in the early stages of the war when Ukraine was on the defense when they were trying to stop Putin's forces from advancing. So I'm not sure I agree with the stance that Libertarian Party of the US took in those first months of war. But today, the solution is negotiations, because Ukraine is not, obviously, we saw the counter-offensive, is not capable of pushing Putin's forces back. And arithmetics, like simple arithmetics, work against Ukraine. Russia is a much more populous state. Putin is a much more totalitarian leader. And these are these are variables that you have to take into account when you try to imagine how the war will pan out. So the time is not on Ukraine's side, like it or not. And I don't particularly like it. I think Putin has brought not just a real tragedy to the west of the Ukraine. I think he committed a crime. He committed a mistake, which is even worse than crime, because for various reasons, doesn't matter. But today, if you are not capable of moving the front line in any meaningful way, you have to negotiate, because people are dying for nothing. And this kind of, the meat grinder that is taking place at the point of at the front is inexcusable. And I'm not sure who's refusing to negotiate. I feel like it might be the Ukrainian side. And if it is, then they are making a huge mistake, because time is not on their side at the moment. Yeah.
And I definitely, as a fellow libertarian, like to blame my own country for all the woes in the world. You were very critical of Russia, and I think the United States libertarians are the same about the United States. But yeah, I'm glad to hear you like-minded views. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for calling. Appreciate it. I have a question for someone in the chat here, actually. It says, so do you support Ukraine's admission to NATO?
I'm not the one who should answer that question, because I'm not the Ukrainian citizen. I'm not the Ukrainian politician. I think it makes sense for Ukraine to ask to be accepted into NATO. I think it's not in the interest of European states, but politics are more complicated than that. So there might be other variables in place. But the one thing you need to understand about Ukraine, as heroic as their defense has been in the last months, as much as they are victims of the Putin's aggression. And I want to reiterate that because in the West, there's all kinds of talks, that Putin was provoked by the NATO bases, etc. No. Putin is the sole perpetrator of that war. There's no shades of gray. There's no, nuances there. It's quite obvious. You don't need to explain away why aggression has been committed. But Ukraine still is a very corrupt state, and it's not obvious that they are going to reinvent themselves after the war, and that's what keeps European countries and the Western states, that's what makes Western states hesitate when they contemplate allowing Ukraine into NATO, because it's a country riddled with all sorts of problems that are not going to solve themselves. So I'm not sure if it's in the interest. I understand that it's in the interest of Ukraine to be accepted into NATO. I'm not sure it's in the interest of the Western countries, and it's not up to me to decide.
Yeah, because it is definitely brought up a lot as the reason why Russia invaded was specifically that reason.
Yeah, it's not a reason; it's a pretext, and you have to distinguish between the two. You don't contemplate. She shouldn't have wore a short skirt, and she wouldn't get raped. That's not how it works. You can, being a politician, being a public speaker, you can contemplate. What kind of events, what a country needs to do to avoid a catastrophic scenario like a war, and that's a legitimate question. But when it comes to naming the perpetrator, we shouldn't
blame
digress and blame the victim for being the victim. We can call a victim stupid. We can call the diplomats incompetent. We can blame all sorts of politicians for not doing their job right, and those are all valid points. But we should not blame the victim. These two arguments, they don't have to go together.
Gotcha. Okay, we got another call. One moment, please. Shout out to Reagan Foster with a question. Hello, thanks for calling. Low Value Mail. Who am I speaking with?
Danny boy, it's Format here. How are you doing?
Hey, what's up, Format? Hold on one moment, please. All right, you're on with Mikhail. Go ahead.
Hey, so are you? I wanted to.
Are you Format? Are you on a speakerphone or something? You just sound really far away.
I'm on speaker mode, but there's also a plane flying over me. One second.
Okay. Sure, it's not a UFO.
it's not a UFO this time, bro.
Okay. He's got a great. This guy's got a really good UFO story. Anyways, go ahead.
No, I live right next to an airport right now, so almost every time I try to have a conversation outside, there's a plane going by. But anyway, so Mikhail, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about just like you personally. Like, say, if you were elected, all right, what would be some of your first orders of business? How would you run things? I just wanted to get like a beat on you.
Well, it's a very general question. Depending on this, like if we're talking about Russia, there are certain things that need to be changed dramatically, and one of the first things that need to be changed is the civilians have to have a right to own firearms. And I think it's incredibly important. I know it sounds like out of the blue I know it sounds out of the blue because we're talking about geopolitics and things like that, which are very important. But I think it's impossible to create a civil society without arming the civil society, without giving
what are the laws
civil
currently?
Society a leverage. It's nearly impossible. Russia has the strictest laws against firearms, I think,
even for hunting
in the whole world.
Even for hunting, stuff like that.
Even for hunting, I mean, like you theoretically you can get a permit, and some people do, but I'm talking about legal right to defense. So it's not enough to legalize ownership of firearms. You need to legalize civil defense. You need to legalize people using firearm to defend themselves. And I think that it has a paramount importance for any country. So yeah, but I think this is like, it's not number one priority, it's number two priority. And the number one priority is to not redistribute, it's not a right word, but so the government in Russia owns 97% of land in Russia. And it might sound crazy to an American because in the US, most land is in the private hands. So I think that's one of the major drivers of poverty in Russia. I think land needs to be sold to Russian citizens on the market together with the whatever precious metals and oil, etc., that is available there. People need to get rich from their land, and Russians were denied that for their entire existence. The example I like to use is that in the US, like one of the backbones of the US prosperity was the gold rush, when people went to Alaska, to seek to pursue their happiness, to seek for money and for prosperity.
Right,
and
right.
in Russia, instead of Klondike, we had Kolyma. Kolyma is the place where Soviet Union forced people to work on gold, in the gold mines to mine gold for the state, and people died there. They didn't
As a
get
punishment?
prosperous. As a punishment, as a resource.
But like, were those people was that a punishment for a crime?
They were they were political prisoners. It was during the Stalin's era. So it didn't matter what you did. They used you as a resource. So the two major reforms that Russia requires is the reform that allows people to defend themselves and not just rely on the government. And the second one is to lift the monopoly on land that the government currently possess. These are two major things that need to be changed.
Yeah, that's pretty good ones. What else, Format?
Yeah, I mean, you're making some good points. I can see how, society with a little bit of this and that would be going in the right direction. Now, as far as, like my follow-up question was going to be like, basically, how would you ensure one's individual rights are respected? And you were kind of, some of the answers you were giving were very much on topic for that. Do you? I have one more question, but just specifically about my this point about ensuring everyone's individual rights as a Russian libertarian. Let's just call you a libertarian. Who cares what comes from? What are some of your ideas? Like, say, you have this power, right? With that, which I personally don't believe anyone should have, to just be at the center and tell everyone what to do. But so theoretically, you do have it to make sure that everyone, like absolutely everyone, has equal rights, right? Because I believe that everyone is born with equal rights. Some people abuse those rights, and they, the people that are able to abuse others' rights, they just call their rights authorities. Like they're some kind of special rights that only they have, but everyone else doesn't have. Do you have any ideas on how to make sure that while you have the reins of power, you do everything possible so that in perpetuity, in the future, everyone is equal? And
essentially power is not abused, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I actually, it's not a simple answer, but it's simple to phrase it. So it's not enough to enshrine rights. You need to empower people to protect it. And that's what you need to concentrate on. I think people, and libertarians in particular, way too concentrated, on phrasing things the correct way, and believe that, if you phrase a certain value, like the correct way, then it's gonna become true, and that it's gonna solve issues in the society. But that's not the case. It's not the rights are not about words. They are about institutions, and they are about redistribution of power. And you need to empower people to protect it. That's why I stressed the importance of people being able to own firearms and use firearms to protect themselves and to organize. Because without that power, you can't protect the right. To elaborate on that, I think the word right got perverted in the recent years a lot, because people call everything they want to have. They call a privilege a right, and we shouldn't mix the two, because those are two different things. They are privileges which you earn and which should be different. Like, people are privileged in a different ways, people are different from each other, and that's why they are privileged. Someone is privileged to be an artist, the other person is privileged to be a doctor, and the other person is privileged to being born in the US, and someone else is privileged to have a good family that raised him well, and he moves on through his life being a decent human being. So these are not rights, these are privileges. And we shouldn't seek the equality of privileges, but we should seek the equality of rights. And the only rights that it's right before the law, and it's a right of equal opportunity, not of equal outcome, but of equal opportunity. So but it's not enough. I think it's pointless to talk about rights and the way how we should phrase those rights for them to be good. We need to talk about institutions and about empowering people to be able to protect their rights, because otherwise we're going to see the degradation of the system and its decline, like what we see in the US today, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think rights are pretty easy to define, because I do agree with you. A lot of people do confuse the terms. I'm very anal about the word rights and the word authority and the difference between the two. It's like the foundation of my moral compass. Now,
can I interrupt you for a second? I just want to stress it again that, you can be anal about the rights and the meaning of words, but all that matters in the end is if you have enough power to protect what you hold to be self-evident truths, in using the words that are used in the Constitution of the US. And if you don't have that power, talk is cheap.
Just to give a top of the head answer to what rights is, it's something everyone has, regardless of where you're born. It's if you're born in the United States or China, everyone is equal in that sense. In that way, everyone has the exact absolute rights. But anyways, the last point I wanted to ask. So, given the reins of power, would you collect taxes to achieve your goals, or do you have any other ideas about how to make the world just?
I think government already collects so many taxes that the amount of money government collects from people is enough to enact whatever reform that a libertarian might deem necessary. So I think movement towards a libertarian society is a gradual process. I don't believe that you can get rid of all the laws and all the taxes and build a free society. That's just not how things work in real politics. But I think what libertarian can do and should do, and like I strongly believe that all the laws that ever needed to be enacted are already enacted. All the taxes that need to be collected and need to be levied are already being levied. So the only thing that is left for the libertarian is move in the opposite direction, to lower the tax burden, to remove the laws, like to get rid of the laws that are hampering the development of society. So to answer your question directly, I wouldn't levy new taxes and I wouldn't enact new laws. I would concentrate on getting rid of laws and getting rid of taxes. But I don't believe that you can get rid of all the taxes and all the laws in one single movement.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. All right, Format, anything else?
That's a good. Just last question, just about you personally. Your English is pretty all right for someone that's lived in Russia most of their life. How did you learn English?
I actually graduated University of Nottingham in United Kingdom. So there's that.
Yeah, there you go.
I see. How long have you lived in the English world?
About 4 years. Oh, well, yeah, I spent 4 years in the UK and I spent 2 years in New Zealand and I spent 1 year in Canada when I was very young.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, well, great answers. Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thanks, Format. All right. Yeah, it's funny you were talking about just like all the wealth stuff in Putin, because, you know, they always have those lists of the richest people in the world. You know, like they'll always come out with, and he's not even on there. Like it's always so funny.
Yeah, but because nobody knows how.
Well, nobody knows, but he's for sure has more money than Elon Musk. Like there's no question. Especially if you're saying that 97% of the land in Russia is essentially owned by the government. You're like, yeah, it has to be something.
Yeah,
has to be something. Okay, we got another call. One moment, please. Hello, thanks for calling Low Value Mail. Who am I speaking with? Hello.
Hey, sir.
Hey, one moment, please. All right,
hey,
you're on with
James.
You're on with Mikhail.
How are you guys tonight?
Good. You are on with Mikhail. Go ahead.
I'm on?
Yeah, you're on the show. Go ahead.
Hey, how are you tonight, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Cool. Question. Well, a couple, whatever time will allow.
Yeah, we have
start the clock. Back in 2012, I guess Russia joined the WTO, correct?
That's correct.
And not like a correlation or anything, but also we passed the Smith-Mund Act in 2012 that changed how a lot of our media went, with like the BBG and the State Department able to provide material for inside the country. Fast forward like 2014, what would you say is the U.S. involvement in that in 2014 in Russia? Fast forward like 2014.
The U.S. involvement in 2014. I don't think there is any, to be honest, because Putin successfully annexed Crimea, and I think U.S. negotiated the truce between Ukraine and Russia, the infamous Minsk agreements. Which were not followed by Ukraine. So, yeah, I think U.S. played a diplomatic role. And I think some guarantees were made to Putin and some guarantees were made to Ukraine. But I don't think the role of the U.S. was in 2014 was very large, simply because Putin took everyone by surprise and the whole special operation in Crimea came out of blue. Yeah.
Would you say it brought Ukraine closer to NATO around then, and the
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think Ukraine is close to joining NATO, to be honest. I think the sentiment of the pro-European, pro-Western sentiment in Ukraine existed way before that. I think Putin solved a lot of issues for Ukraine. Like the one thing that the West doesn't realize about this conflict is that the more Putin progresses towards the towards the west of the Ukraine, the more eastern territories he occupies, the fewer Russian people there is in Ukraine. And the more homogeneous the society becomes, and the more pro-Western the society becomes, because whatever republic they had before 2014, it included a lot of people who were strongly pro-Russian. And after Putin occupied Ukraine, automatically the country became less pro-Russian because it didn't include as many Russians as it did a year prior. So to answer your question, Ukraine is moving closer to the West the more successful Putin's advances are, because they lose the territories that might have withheld it from moving too close to the European Union and too close to NATO. Does it make sense, what I'm saying?
Do you think, yes. Do you think Russia, Putin, maybe Putin and the population of Russia, maybe differing opinions, obviously, a whole country, very large country. What would their idea about globalism, like a global world order of sorts? Where like
we have a
the UN,
the
WHO.
No, yeah, I understand. I think UN is very different from WTO and from whatever
they're
Klaus
just
Schwab
like
is doing.
international bodies with multiple countries
I wouldn't.
represented.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't lump it together with every other global institution, because UN is a thing within itself. So to answer your question, you see, the problem is that Russia has its own version of globalism, and I think the West doesn't appreciate it enough, and it's rooted in the Soviet era as well as in the Tsarist era. So whenever Putin tries to present himself as a force against Western globalism, he actually means Western globalism. He does not oppose globalism as a concept. He just wants to rule it, and he wants to wield more power within the globalist system. And if you look closely at the kind of laws that Putin enacts within Russia, they are actually very much aligned with the kind of laws that you see in Germany, and you see in US, and you see in Canada. So we have our own digital currency being rolled in right now.
I agree.
So we have Putin is trying to build the social rating system, and he actually used the opportunity of the COVID lockdowns to test run it and to see if it works. So
sounds similar to Xi in China.
Exactly. So if you look at his domestic policies, you're not going to be able to differentiate him from the Western politician. It's the global conflict that sets him apart, but not his goals.
Interesting.
All right. Well, thank you for the time. I figured I'm on here long. Thank you, Danny, and thank you, caller. You guys have a good night.
No problem. Take care. I actually have a question. This is from my dad. So both of my parents are from Russia. They left in
all right.
1975.
I wondered if Polishchuk was Russian.
Yeah. Both of my parents are from Russia. So when I told them you were coming on, they had some questions. They specifically, this is from my dad. He was wondering, is there support for libertarianism outside of the major cities?
So I mentioned that.
I know you said, you went the whole
across
tour,
Russia.
Right?
Across Russia was immensely popular, and I'm the only one who actually managed to accomplish something like that. So I'd say there's a great potential. Very few people know what libertarianism is, even though thanks to my work, more and more people are becoming aware. So I think there's a great potential. But at the moment, it's a moot point, because there is no politics in Russia anymore. As little politics as there were like 3 years ago, there was still some. But today, there's just war and nothing else, war and fear.
Yeah. Because, I mean, libertarianism is basically the opposite of the current system. It's, the current system is the most amount of government for the most part, and then this is the least amount of government. So it seems like it would be a big sell to people, even if it's in their best interest. It's just such a massive change?
I wouldn't say it is a massive change, and there's a lot of conservatism preventing people from, sympathizing with libertarian ideas. But also, Russia has a very peculiar history. Russians never saw anything good come out of the government. Like, all we saw from the government is suffering, hunger, tragedy, war, things like that. So it's actually very easy to convince an ordinary Russian that government is up to no good. So a lot of Russians are naturally predisposed towards libertarianism, much more so than Europeans or the Americans, because you still live under this illusion that, government might be up to something good. Right. Russians don't have such illusions.
Yeah. My mom is probably a little more pessimistic, although they both kind of are. But her question is basically, she says, do you really think that Russian society even cares about democracy? Like she's very pessimistic.
But democracy is different from liberty. I'm not a fan of democracy either, at least not in a European sense, definitely. So I think we need to set these two things apart. There's liberty, which must be preserved, which must be protected, and democracy. It's one of many, many different ways of reaching an agreement within a society. So don't mix the two. They are completely different. You have like I live in Latin America right now. There are a lot of strong democracies. Venezuela used to be a strong democracy, but they have no liberty. So I don't care for democracy. I care for liberty.
Right. Okay, fair enough. We're going to wrap up very shortly. Thank you again for your time. I do appreciate it. So I have a question actually from JR, one of the patrons, talking about Telegram. So you're a big proponent of Telegram. Yeah. It's in Russia. It's considered one of the more secure.
It's at least it hasn't been compromised yet. We don't have proof that Telegram ever leaked a private conversation to the government anywhere, not just in Russia, but in Brazil, for example, where I live. Telegram is pretty big as well.
And that's Telegram was created by
Pavel Durov. Yeah, it was created by a Russian. He lives in Arab Emirates in Dubai nowadays, because his previous business, he used to own of Kontakte, which is like Facebook alternative in Russia, which is huge. It's like the biggest social network. It was expropriated by the government, basically. After that, he moved to Dubai and created Telegram.
Okay. Yeah, I guess his question was, is there any, because I guess there's some YouTuber who's maybe found some backdoors or whatnot.
No, okay.
Telegram,
So there are no backdoors in Telegram. At least none of them have been proven. Okay. And of all the massively used messengers, Telegram is by far the safest one, because we know for a fact that WhatsApp leaks its chat history to police whenever asked. We know for a fact that Viber does the same. We know for a fact that Facebook does the same. There's not a single fact that proves that Telegram leaks chat history. So to me, that's good enough.
Yeah, until that happens.
Until that happens, there is a benefit of a doubt. So, and again, you need to consider alternatives. Alternatives are much worse. As I mentioned, we know for a fact that everyone else leaks chat history except Telegram.
Interesting. And what about Bitcoin? Because obviously I know the libertarians here love Bitcoin.
I love Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been a godsend for the Russian opposition, because it's basically the only way we can protect our money. It's because the government uses banks basically as part of its repressive system, and they freeze the accounts, they freeze the money, they expropriate the money as well. And I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2011. I invested in Bitcoin when it was less than $5.
Nice. That's like the biggest flex that every libertarian has, because it's generally
And I have screens to prove it, because I actually wrote in Twitter that I was buying it and speculating how much it's going to cost. So
that is a huge flex for libertarians, because they all are like, I was in the day it came out. It's just like it literally checks every box of being a libertarian. So they all have. And is it able to like purchase in Russia?
Okay, so Russian system is very different from the US. In the US, you have very strict laws and everyone abides by them, and the government is pretty good at enforcing it. In Russia, it's quite the opposite. Russia is always in a kind of state of anarchy within itself. That you have repression, you have tyranny, you have political repressions, etc., etc. But on the human level, on the level, it's a lot of things are possible. So officially, government regulates Bitcoin. On practice, you can buy Bitcoin in any major city for cash, and nobody's gonna know.
Right, you can buy it for cash. But if you were to
always, I never. That's another flex. And if you ask me, I think it's much bigger one. Is that I never ever had an account on a currency exchange.
So. Right. So you always bought them just like offline.
Always peer to peer. Yeah.
Peer to peer. Okay. All right. We got another caller, probably the last one of the night. One moment, please. Hello. Thanks for calling Low Value Mail. One moment.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, what's up? Just 1 second, and you're on with Mikhail. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, как дела, Миша? Hey, so my question was, это известно для меня. It's like, it means something to me. But, what is it? Like, I'm trying to explain to people that, because I am Russian, I explain to Americans, like, Russia's real spread apart, and there are people who live out in the middle of nowhere, like, в области, Прямой Роде, Siberia, Yakutsk, like people live in very remote areas. And what is the current state and situation of people who choose to live off the grid, and how much can they resist государстве, or like the government coming in and, bothering them about that?
Well, they live at the mercy of the government. Basically, they're in a similar conditions to the American Indians who live in reservations. Yeah, they have their own autonomous regions. They have territories that they not rule over, but I'm not sure what's the correct word, but where they roam. But they don't have political representation, and Russia is not gonna split on these seams because there's no political will there among these kind of tribes, and there's no political culture. So so basically to answer your question, people who live off the grid in the northernest part of Siberia and Chukotka and on the east of Russia, they don't have their own statehood. They don't have their own political ambitions, and all they care about is living the traditional way of life. Yeah.
Okay, and but how often would they get, would the government bother them? Like, for instance, like you were talking about owning firearms, and I know. Yeah, the government. There, you need. Go ahead.
Got it. Yeah, the government bothers them very much. Basically, they are at the mercy of the government. So whatever privileges they don't have rights, they have privileges. So whatever they can do to, the government may take away tomorrow. And that's exactly what happened during the Soviet era, where they were forced to re-educate themselves. They were forced to abandon their traditional way of life. So it's not like, again, Russian system is very different from the American system. In the US, you have the rule of law, and some of the things enshrined in the rule of law protect the American tribes, for example. But in the US, everything is a privilege. In Russia, everything is a privilege. So you can be fine today and bust tomorrow.
Yeah, just depends on the will of the government, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So and
I understand that. And продолжай.
No, go on. I finished my point.
I was gonna say that you guys were talking about picking different English words to represent rights or stuff, and my personal belief has always been that liberty is inherent and rights are afforded to you. So, liberty should take take the front seat, and rights are just an excuse for government to exist. But I'm
not sure I agree with you. I think it's gonna be a difficult philosophical talk point. Okay, so I'm not sure I agree with you because liberty needs to be protected, and rights is how we protect our liberties. Because like a free man is not necessarily free from coercion. To protect yourself from coercion and from violence and from aggression, you need to create a social contract. You need to create a right, because before creating the right, you're basically staying in the state of anarchy, and state of anarchy is the state of perpetual aggression, if you will.
Interesting.
Does it?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that makes sense. That seems to be.
Yeah, like the Saint Paul said that where there is no law, there is no crime, and I think there's a lot of truth in it.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, caller?
Yeah, just one last question. I mean, I know it came in late, but I know y'all were talking a little bit of Ukraine conflict stuff. My personal belief is like the best situation I could see come out of this whole like entanglement or whatever people want to call it is the whole eastern section of Ukraine becomes an independent buffer state, which like because like I remember in the referendums of 2014, 2015, like a lot of those eastern parts, they voted to be independent of Ukraine and Kiev and wanted to join Russia, and Putin told them, I recognize your independence, but you guys are going to have to be independent on your own. But we'll trade with you, and they'll be part of like whatever the CIS used to be, Confederate of Independent States. Do you see that as a possibility?
Yeah, I don't see it as a possibility at all. And even the referendums that were held in 2014 and 15 were sham. So I would strongly advise you not to take them seriously. And nobody wants, neither Russia nor Ukraine wants to see these territories to become independent, nor neither is it politically feasible because they don't have resources to be independent. They don't have like the logistics of, if you look at the geography of the areas that were occupied by Russia, it's just not feasible. So nobody wants to see these territories independent, especially the territories themselves. If you look at the Donetsk and Luhansk, who voted to join Russia a couple of months ago, I put in brackets, there was never a plan to remain independent. They never wanted to be independent. It actually was perceived by a lot of Russians and a lot of people from Donetsk and Luhansk as a big betrayal that Russia refused to join, to accept them into the Union.
Yeah, I remember that.
After 2014. So nobody wants that. It's like in nobody's interest whatsoever.
And all right, to follow that up is Ukraine going to become the same thing where certain parts of the Middle East have become, where they're literally have become playgrounds for testing out new war machines and new war technology, as instances in Yemen?
Yeah. I hope not, because we're not seeing that today. Actually, the U.S. is reluctant to provide Ukraine with modern weapons, and I don't think it's in anybody's interest to perpetuate this particular war. Hopefully, it's going to end soon.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, caller. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to wrap this up very shortly. Thank you again for your time, Mikhail. Where can people find you? Where can people find you? The best place?
On Twitter, /msvetov, or on Telegram. You can you can search for SVTV News. That's my news outlet. Again, the second biggest libertarian news outlet in the world after Reason.com. I'm very proud of it. We just opened 2 years ago, and we have already pretty big.
And do you have captioned, subtitled content? Because I looked like a lot of your YouTube channels in Russia. But
yeah, my YouTube is in Russia. My YouTube is my YouTube is in Russian. But if you want to see my talk with Hans Hermann Hoppe, or you want to see his lecture that he gave in Moscow, it's subtitled in Russian, but it's spoken in English. So
I was watching that today. Yeah, I was watching that.
Yeah,
today.
All right.
So one last question before we're going to wrap this up. So you obviously you're living in South America. Is there, because obviously like in Brazil has an alliance with Russia, Is there any sort of issue with that, or is that just an economic alliance and that's just...
No, it's an economic alliance, and also because Lula hates the U.S. and wants to stick it up to the Americans. I don't think there is a real, like, the distance between Brazil and Russia is such that you can't really have a close connection, because like the geography works against it. So the reason I chose Brazil is because it actually allows me to remain independent of Russia and independent of Europe and independent of the U.S. and keep my and it allows me to speak my heart and say what I think is important to be said. Yeah, because in like my colleagues and a lot of people who left and immigrated into the European countries, they actually faced their own censorship. And the big story with the Dost TV station was that they were expelled from Baltic states after they broadcasted some critical information about Ukraine. So I'm not in that position, and I'm very proud of remaining independent through these daring times.
Yeah. Are you the only one down there in Brazil, like Russian libertarian?
Yeah, I'm the only one. Well, but mostly because I'm the only one who can afford to remain here. And yeah, but I'm not working in Brazil. Like I work online. I organize the movement, but I'm financially independent thanks to my investment in Bitcoin, and that provides me with a lot of freedom. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, and everybody go check out Mikhail wherever you can find him, YouTube, Telegram, all that stuff. I've been Danny Polishchuk. Tomorrow night we got a new episode of The Bathhouse, and if you like the show and you want more of the show, support me on Patreon or Twitter. Have a good night. Take care, everybody.
My shit heroic. Empathic abilities, yeah, my face be also stoic. Bleep, blow up, nigga, that just means I'm working. They see me as a leader, so that's why I'm Captain Kirkin. These tracks from the stars, that much is for certain. You can feel this hit if you up or if you hurt. I'm raising my stock, not talking my feet in some Birkin. Number Johnny 5, got a fucking short circuit. Bring the track to life when I spit phenomenally. When I hit, she feel that shit in her abdominals. These rappers make me laugh like comic view, they comical. You know I got a ball out, I hit the track running just like Sonic do. They don't wanna turn on my light switch. Yeah, they was trying to get me on my hype shit. Yeah, they don't wanna turn on my light switch. Yeah, and they tried to down me on some KO type shit. Yeah, they don't wanna turn on my light switch. Yeah, now we pulling up pressure on some flight shit. They don't wanna turn on my light switch. Yeah, they don't wanna turn on my light switch. They don't wanna turn on my light switch. Yeah, they was trying to get me on my hype shit. Yeah, they don't wanna turn on my light switch. Yeah, and they tried to down me on some KO type shit. Yeah, they don't wanna turn on my light switch.